All right. Okay, so I just want to review the agenda a little bit before we get started. So we have two presentations today, and we are continuing our work in 2024 around looking at the many components of Act 76, the childcare bill, which is now Act 76, and looking at implementation. And as you most of you know, that was a very comprehensive bill with lots of components to it. And along with BBF, the ELD committee is taking the responsibility to pay attention to many of those components and how that implementation is going and getting feedback and learning more about the bill. Anytime there is legislation, especially a bill as big as the childcare bill, there's a lot of opportunities to maybe tweak, make things a little bit better, just understand any unintended consequences. And so ELD has been tapped to pay attention to that and track that. And, along the way, or as we get toward the end of the full implementation, which, the bill implements, as many of you also know, in different timelines right through next October and even in December when the UPK report is due. So as we go along, identify what might be some recommendations, some considerations, and bring those to BBF and the state advisory team. So we're going to start off today with a presentation from First Children's Finance. Erin Roche is here, the Vermont Director of First Children's Finance, and we're going to focus on, I think, kind of two things. One is CCFAP and the increase in payments that happened in January, or the increase happened in December, but hit people's accounts in January. And the work they're doing in the field around CCFAP, family eligibility, how the questions that are coming up. And then there's a few questions for some of the early childhood educators that are on the call that we have prepped a few to answer for us. And so I'll turn it over to Erin. If Beth or Jen, do you have anything else to add before we turn it over to Erin? And following Erin, Susan Titterton, who's a project coordinator at Vermont AYC for Advancing as a Profession, is going to come and provide an update and talk about the process that Vermont AYC is beginning around submitting an application to the Office of Professional Recognition. And so we'll hear more about that, and we can talk about how that aligns with the overall goal of the child care bill and fair compensation. Anything to add, Brett, Jen, or Beth? Awesome. Erin, take it away.
Thanks, Sherry. And thanks to the Early Learning and Development Committee for having me here today. I know that Jen Severance and Rose Morrison, my colleagues at First Children's Finance, are regular participants excuse me, in this committee. But it's wonderful for me to get to be here and talk a little bit about really the work that they're doing. So I invite Jen and Rose to jump in and correct me when I say things that are wrong, or if I have more to add to points that I wanted to make. So I started, when Sherry asked me if I would give this sort of update, I imagined I was going to make this slideshow and lots of charts and graphs. If you know me, you know I enjoy charts and graphs. And I realized as I was thinking about it that we'd be here all day if I put together slides and did charts and graphs, because in the 6 months since Act 76 passed, and honestly, in the 11 months that the First Children's Finance office has been open in Vermont, so much has happened. Why I invited Jen and Rose to jump in when I do leave something out. But it has been a wild and exciting ride these last 6 months. And as I've been talking about the work that First Children's Finance is doing in Vermont, I always like to start by saying, when we opened this office, And certainly when we wrote the proposal to start this program, we had no idea Act 76 was going to pass, right? We didn't even know what Act 76 was going to be, or H217, or, right? We just thought we were going to be here to provide business support, assistance, consulting for the sort of usual day-to-day things that childcare businesses need and need help with. I just think it's important to remind ourselves just how far and how much has changed, even in sort of the premise of our operation. So Sherry asked me to talk a little about successes and challenges, specifically for the Business Technical Assistance Program that First Children's Finance operates in Vermont. And I'm going to do that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of our work in business and technical assistance that is sort of outside of Act 76, but related, because Act 76 changed everything as far as childcare businesses go. And so it's kind of hard to tease those things apart. Anyway, so thinking about Act 76 and sort of some of the things that I think First Children's Finance has been successful in. I think that, and I'll also talk a little about things that I think the law has been successful in. First of all, like I said, we didn't know Act 76 was coming. As soon as the deputy commissioner said, well, these seem like things that First Children's Finance could be helping with, we pivoted rapidly. And you know, we do a lot of trainings, we do cohorts that last several months, but at the end of June and early July, we couldn't wait to develop a training. We couldn't wait to start a 2-month cohort. People had questions, right? Things changed immediately. Some people's rates changed. The cap on rate increases went into effect immediately. Readiness payments went into effect just about immediately. So we started making videos, and Rose and Jen both really hate me because I said, let's make these videos. This will be super fun. And I hope they're fun and slightly entertaining to you, as we are clearly not actors. But they were great ways to get short pieces of information out to the field in a really timely way. At least I think they were. We got really great feedback on them. We continue to make them as the pieces of the law get implemented, but it seems a little less urgent, so we haven't been making nearly as many. The other sort of success is that I think that for the Business and Technical Assistance Program and First Children's Finance more generally, we were able to carve out a role for ourselves and figure out, with the help of the state, with the help of Let's Grow Kids, with the help of all of you, asking us questions, letting us know what you needed as far as business assistance in adapting to this new landscape. I know I was surprised and mostly happy with the first time I saw on the CDD blog about H217. Oh, and if you have questions, call First Children's Finance. And I thought, oh, I did not know that was going to happen. That's great, right? That we are a trusted partner for the state. And so again, when I think about successes and like how far we've come in those 6 months, those were not things that necessarily we expected to happen. And so I think of them as a success where we have, I think, demonstrated that we will do the work, we will do the research, we will understand the law, we will understand the business implications of the law, we will be honest about what the impacts are on people's businesses. And and then the last thing, I guess that leads into the last thing, which was, I think that our other big success has been, we have been, and Rose and Jen particularly, have been great listeners and have been accessible, have answered the same question, I don't know, 50, 100 times, right? And done it calmly and professionally. And I think that I think they spent a lot of time early on in those September months, and even continue to really listen thoughtfully, and hear where everyone is coming from and take their questions and concerns really seriously. I have never experienced them dismissing somebody as, oh, that's a dumb question, or you should know the answer to that by now, or you shouldn't have done it that way, right? I think their approach has been to listen, take things seriously, and then, especially early on, do the research, right? One of the challenges of this new law and how quickly it went into effect is that you all have full-time jobs, more than full-time jobs. You're smart people, but you don't have time to do the research into the minutia of the law and what the dates are and when things happen. And I think by listening and being intentional and thoughtful, and then going away saying, oh, you know what, this is a new law, we don't know the answer, we're going to find the answer, we're going to get back to you. And so I think from that, we have been able to build a sort of stable wealth of information about the law, and we don't always have to research the questions anymore, which is kind of exciting. So anyway, those are the things that I think of as the successes as far as First Children's Finance and Act 76, and how we've been able to respond to that. Some of the I would say, yeah, some of the challenges, one really big challenge came to mind just thinking about our work. I know that there's challenges with the law, but that's not exactly what I was asked to talk about. Is that I think, especially because things were happening so fast and we were learning as you all were learning, that we got really good at answering specific questions. What's the rate cap? When does it go into effect? What's the new reimbursement rate? How do I raise my tuition? Whatever, very specific questions. And I think we got really good at that, and we now have all of this knowledge and we can answer questions really efficiently. But a lot of times those questions are just the tip of an iceberg. And I think that childcare businesses, business leaders have been working so hard for so long that and that their jobs haven't changed. They've just gotten a little more complicated. Maybe they have a little more resources now. It's hard for them to see the bigger picture. And we are really actively starting to pivot towards, yeah, we'll answer your question, but we want you to think about what's underlying that question for your business, because it's not just a question about what's the rate cap. Right, it's 7.2%, and we can answer that over and over and over again. But there's a bigger question, or several bigger questions that are underneath that when people ask us about the rate cap. And I think that that's something that going forward through 2024, and I have talked to my team about this, right, that we're going to really start to ask the next questions, and not just answer that one specific question, because it's not just knowing what the rate cap is. It might be, I didn't raise my rates for the last 2 years, and now you're telling me I can only raise it by 7.2%, and I need to figure out what that means for my business. I need to understand how, what my expenses, can I cut my expenses because they've gone up more than 7%? How am I going to thrive in this new environment? And I just use that as an example, because it's one of the questions we get asked a lot right now. So that's kind of some successes, and I think a big challenge for us. I thought I would also use a few minutes of my time to talk about, right, over time, the questions that we get and the work that we're being asked to do has changed, as different pieces of the law have gotten implemented and as people have figured out how to respond to them. But I just thought I'd let you know the three, and Jen and Rose, please jump in if you have another one. But I think the three most common questions that we're getting right now are related to the rate cap and what that means and what is it and what's it going to be next year. Is it going to be the same next year? Is it going to go away? Right? It's about that. That is something that is stressful. And then the other two questions, one is about estimating and understanding what these eligibility increases are going to, the CCFAP eligibility increases are going to mean for their enrollment, because they do have big implications for the revenue side of childcare businesses. And so wanting to understand that, feeling a little like they're stepping off a cliff because they have no, they don't feel like they have any way to understand. And when we talk about 400% of poverty and 575% of poverty, it's kind of an abstract concept, especially when we say, oh yeah, and those are going to change, the numbers right now aren't even the numbers that they're going to be. I think it leaves people very unsettled. And so that's the second question we get a lot, is about how do I even estimate? How do I even make a budget for next year when I don't have any idea? And the difference between my tuition and the state reimbursement is now quite large in some cases. So that's the second question. And then the third question is about communication to families. And there's a whole bunch of questions that we get. And one is, who's going to tell the families about this? When's that going to happen? Do I need to tell the families? What should I tell the families? And it has to do with the new eligibility and whether they should try to enroll in CCFAP. What is CCFAP? And there was a last point I was going to make about that. And especially if they're doing some kind of tuition increase, how that gets messaged in. And anyway, so those are the three big buckets of questions that I think we get asked a lot. So it's estimating eligibility, it's communication to families, and it's about the cap on rate increases. I'm gonna pause for a second in case Jen or Rose want to jump in, because I talk a lot. Thanks. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, like I said at the beginning, not everything we do is Act 76, right? We started this office to provide business and technical assistance to childcare businesses before there was Act 76. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the other work that we've been doing over the last 6 months, which is related to Act 76 in some ways. But right, Jen and Rose have been doing business training. We did, I didn't bring the numbers, but we did about 10, 11 trainings in the fall. I think we have another 10 or 11 scheduled for the winter. We've also been doing cohorts of business leaders, 10 to 15 business leaders at a time. It's usually about 2 months. Anyway, so we've been walking people through that. What else I want to say? We've been getting a lot, and some of these things are related to Act 76. We've been getting a lot of requests for meetings and questions about sort of new capital projects for building new childcare businesses, or starting new family childcares, and just general business support around that. Like, some of them have to do with grants, some of them are looking for funding, but some of them are just trying to understand how you go about it and how they should be thinking about it. I think that the volume of those inquiries that we're getting is higher than we were getting when we started the office. So I think it is related to Act 76, right? A certain level of interest in childcare as a business right now, where I don't think there was that level of interest a year ago. And then we've also been doing some work, and will continue to do some work, for programs that are in crisis or nearly in crisis, or programs that are taking over programs that are in crisis, right? So really working through making sure that families are taken care of when a program needs to close, making sure that staff are taken care of as best we can, helping people manage boards and figure out how to do that kind of work. And also, lastly, I'll just mention, we've started doing some real one-on-one financial analysis and consulting with a few childcare businesses, either that are going through transitions or trying to maximize their revenue, plan for the future, save for a rainy day, those sorts of things. Anyway, that was me talking a lot, but that's what we've been doing for the last 6 months.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to add, Erin, was that we've been supporting the grants.
Yep.
Also, so that's some additional work, but I'll pop our website into the link into the chat.
Awesome. I'd be happy to answer any questions or anything that came up for anybody else.
So if anyone has any specific questions for Erin or members of the team now, and then there are 2 questions that we were hoping those of you, some of you got a little heads up on this, but 2 questions for the early childhood education programs that are a part of ELD to think about answering. And I put those in the chat.
Yeah, so the first question, I kind of alluded to that. We feel like we are getting sort of a sense of optimism from the field, and even maybe more so from people that are interested in entering the field or building a new childcare center, either at an employer site or as part of other development that's going on. And so we don't want to draw too many conclusions without having more input. I was wondering, so we feel like there's a sort of a sense of optimism, or like there's opportunity for the future. And I just would love to hear from anybody here if you have that sense, or if you don't have that sense, and kind of what you're hearing from your peers.
I can talk on that one. I'm trying to find my camera at the same time I'm talking. You're just going to see the blank screen because I'm talking. But as far as looking to the future, I've talked to a lot of people who are is this possible? Is this possible? They're still on the, can I do this type of thing? And almost looking at Act 76 as like a grant, or where's the restriction? Because we've never had money in the field that's just yours. So one of the suggestions I tend to give often is make 2 lists, a bucket list and I want and I need. And that's the way you're going to look at that. And you're going to look at your 3 areas. You're going to look at yourself, your business, and your children. And you're going to make sure that each of those categories are covered and filled, because this is to make life better in all 3 fronts. Your infrastructure is better, your children are better off, and you're better off, so you stay in the field. So once they work through that process, and once I work through that process, all of a sudden you're excited. There aren't restrictions to this. This is what you need. The big problem that I have with families, or programs are having with families, is how to communicate that 35% increase we just had. And so my way of doing that is I just tell them that 35% was to keep me open. Okay. We've struggled. Programs have struggled. We've lived off market rate. The only business in America that lives off market rate. What does somebody want to pay for your services instead of what the cost is? I said, the state has looked at it. We know that we have a problem with capacity. In order to ensure that and grow that, what they did was they are beginning to look at cost of care. What that does for me is I don't have to work 3 jobs. My helper doesn't have to work 3 jobs. We don't have to subsidize what we need, and your children have more opportunities because of that. And because the rate increased and we can get more money in, the next thing goes to, why do more people get it for free and I still have to pay? Okay. And you're going to tax me. So now I'm actually paying, and they always say 11% more than before. It's not 11, it's 0.11. And we do a little bit of math there. They're good with that. And then I say, because the state as a community is contributing to the cost of care, you're actually better off, because I'm not having to raise my rates more than 7%.
Thanks.
The ones on the 35, when they're asking, why does that why didn't I see a difference? It's because rates were always based on copay, which was a percentage of an amount of a slot. And now it's a families based on your income. None of my business, not my concern, but the state has a formula that says out of your income, this is the percentage you can afford to pay. Okay, so when I say it has nothing to do with me and that goes in and it will increase, I also give CDD a break and say they don't have the rates because the feds haven't released them yet. Once the feds release them in February, CDD is actively waiting for those and they will put out something so that we know. The other thing that I encourage programs to do is include, sorry, I'm rambling, but is to include in their updates, their yearly updates from the family, the application for subsidy for assistance, and their pay stubs. And so mine will do that in March, preempting the April extension so that that stuff is ready. And if they have questions, I can help them have that ready so they can submit that in April in order to get a reduction if that's if they're eligible for that. But it gets them used to the process. It's not as scary. They're not doing it last minute because they know what they have to be collecting in March in order to apply in April. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think you spoke to a lot of the questions that we're hearing about how to communicate these things. I think it can be difficult to, especially if families are going to feel like they're not paying less yet, that these communications can be difficult. And so I would, if you're struggling with how to communicate, I'd encourage you to reach out to us, reach out to Let's Go Kids. We'd be happy to help with that. We're working on some templates for what you might want to say and sort of addressing some of the points that Chris just made. So happy to help with that.
I will say, Erin, the confusing question for family-based, all that I've spoken to is understanding the tax implications between 100% write-off, time, space, and depreciation, because they want to make sure they spread the money so that they're not giving so much of it back in taxes if they can prioritize one group over another or mix and match to have a better tax base.
Yeah, I will say, Chris, thanks for bringing that up. I think I'm not out of line in saying this is Rose Morrison's favorite thing to talk about. So feel free to send people to her if they have questions about how to figure out time, space, allocation, and why that's useful. And anyway, because that is an important question. The other thing you brought up that is on my mind, it came up a little bit when the law first passed about the payroll tax, the revenue source for all of this. And there is a little bit of guidance at the Department of Taxes about that. We expect to see more guidance coming up. I know that is something that there are going to be questions about as we get closer. That doesn't go into effect until July. So we're waiting to get past this eligibility change in April to start addressing that. But that is a great point that some people automatically jump to 11%, and it is not 11%. And the employer not self-employed amount is 0.44%, not 44% or something like that. So anyway, more to come on that, but we've taken an approach of just like piece by piece as pieces of the law come online. That's when we try to address.
It may be helpful, Erin, if once you get those little blurbs on little explanations, if that was sent out via email so programs could cut and paste that into their newsletters or a updated financial, whatever they want to call it, so that everyone gets the same thing so that word of mouth doesn't change quite as much.
Thanks.
Aaron, this is Dan from VCLF. One thing I've been seeing from my desk is in terms of the first movers for trying to expand or add capacity, it's often the larger programs, like 100 capacity program going to a 200 capacity program. And I think that might be dovetailing off what Christina was just saying. But in terms of who's approaching you for advice, are you seeing any of the smaller programs coming to you guys who are trying to figure out if there are expansion opportunities, or is that just not in the cards right now as folks figure things out?
We don't necessarily track programs by their size, so I'm not sure I can answer with accuracy your question. Do feel like we get questions from programs of all sizes. I think the largest programs often have the sort of administrative resources to be thinking about expanding, right? Or thinking about budgets and what that might mean. I think, and I think family childcare is on the other side of that, right? It's their livelihood. And so they may have some capacity to be thinking about what their business is. And I think the sort of mid-sized ones in the middle maybe are squeezed because they don't have enough to have that sort of administrative capacity to really be planning and thinking about the ramifications for the future always. But that's just speculation on my part.
No, that matches what I'm seeing. That's probably the right answer. Thank you, though.
Dan, I will say, like, having done capacity grants since 2018, I feel like every year there's been more and more people interested in opening family childcare homes. So I think that's wonderful and really great news, and we're working hard to support them. But our last round was, I feel like I haven't counted the numbers, but I really feel like it was the largest round that we had with the number of family childcare homes.
Yeah, I did at one point count, and I think we were at least 13. I think we had at least 13.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I don't draw too many conclusions, but I know at least a few of those were, or not the family childcare, but a few opportunities that we've been talking to are ones where they've had a family childcare and now they want to open a center. Or right, and that feels like that expansion that you're talking about, because they can't expand their family childcare in their home, and so it's got to take a big financial, right, risk and opportunity to be able to go from a home-based business to opening a center. I think even more so than like an expansion project for a center, some way. So it might be that Act 76 is starting to unlock some of those things.
I can answer these questions too. I think there is a sense of optimism and opportunity with a side of skepticism of like, I think there's still kind of this disbelief, or like not 100% sure that it's gonna be there and it's gonna last and it's gonna, so I think people are kind of struggling with that. And I think I've been surprised about how, and just in different meetings I've sat in over the past month and stuff, of just how many center-based programs where this increase in subsidy is really not impacting them. And that's been really surprising to me. And, you know, we just had our directors meeting last night and we brought Aaron to our meeting, which, to talk about these things. So that's one thing that we've done in Addison County. But you know, even just programs down here where, you know, they don't have a mass, a critical mass of families receiving subsidy now. So that increase that just happened is nice, but it's not really impacting their bottom line. And if if the changes to subsidy do impact their bottom line, it probably won't be until October, when more families possibly will be eligible. And I have been surprised about how that is kind of true around the state. And I guess because we've always had a critical mass of families receiving subsidy, I never kind of thought about that. And so it's just interesting to me to know that there is a lot of good happening, but yet it's not going to impact every program in the same way. So I don't, yeah, I don't know. And I think for teachers, I think they're excited. I think for programs who have been like, I talk to my teachers about it a lot. I actively move as much money I can to them. But I think that the level of burnout is so high among teachers that it's hard to be super optimistic and exciting about these changes. And I think the pressure we feel from families to really truly get 100% back to pre-COVID can be immense at times. That just kind of, it's really hard for teachers. And so I think that they're struggling with that, having that same level of optimism.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I think you bring up a great point that no matter how much money gets invested, it doesn't make the job any easier, right? Like the job is a hard job no matter what. And getting paid more maybe makes your life better, but it doesn't make the job itself easier by itself. So I think that's a really helpful reminder. And I also wanted to follow up and say that that we also have heard from a number of programs that either don't have any or very few families getting participating in CCFAP, and so some of them, and this relates also to the rate cap challenge, right? If they didn't raise their rate in early 2023 or in 2022, and they have very few families eligible for CCFAP, then they're actually in some ways in a worse place, or certainly not in a better place. And the other group that I think has struggled, and I think there's overlap here, is programs that had relatively high weekly rates compared to the reimbursements before this increase are not feeling the same. They're not feeling the same benefit from the rate increases. And I think a lot of programs that have relatively higher rates also have relatively more families that aren't eligible for CCFAP, and so they kind of, right, they don't get the newer reimbursement rates because they don't have those families. Their rates were higher and they're constrained because they can't raise them anymore. And anyway, and families are having some expectation of either pre-COVID levels of service or better affordability or something because they've heard about this new law. And so there is a little bit of sort of cognitive dissonance in this whole space. And it is, the impact is uneven, as Linda said.
I think
Yeah.
another maybe misconception or oversight is everybody wants pre-COVID. Linda, you mentioned that. But pre-COVID, we also were at a national interest rate different than we are. Products cost less. So our bottom lines have gone up. So lots of times I have an assistant and paying them the increase, it's not necessarily going to get them back to the comfort level they were when interest rates were lower and cost of services were lower and things like that, because the dollar doesn't go as far as it did.
Yeah.
So I think that's a misconception too. I mean, prior to COVID, if you gave $1.50 raise to your teachers, they would have been ecstatic. And now they're going, it still isn't enough. And they're right, but it's not from lack of trying. It's just where we are right now in the world. So understanding that, and when things come down and whatever, it's going to feel even better. That's but a lot of people are looking to before COVID. Everything in the world divided. Everything either happened before or after, and that's the end of it. And nobody knows the year or the day anymore. It was just before or after.
True.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, Meg, you had
I
your
think,
hand up.
yeah, I think Meg and then Sonia, and I think that'll be the last two comments, questions for this segment before we shift. Thanks.
And I apologize, Erin, because I know you don't have this, but I think Linda's comment about, this, the changes in rates are impacting some programs more than others, or they're impacting programs in different ways, raises questions for me about access to programs for families and where families are. And I would love to see some data, which I know, Erin, you don't have, but I'm hoping maybe the CDD might be able to pull something together about what programs kids are in. Are they trying to access full-time programs? Are they using more home-based programs? Is there any correlation with STARS level? I have a lot of questions about those kinds of things. And I think as we look at the overall system and how we want to be inclusive and ensure that there's access for all kids, those are really, really important data points to have a good handle on, so that we can make sure that every child has access to a high quality preschool program or early childhood program.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Meg. Go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah, so I just want to speak to a couple things. One, respond to what Linda mentioned about the burnout and whatnot. So while we talk a lot about raising compensation, including benefits and whatnot, and the impact that will have in a positive way, that's absolutely accurate. And I can already see that with my own staff, where I've been working and doing that for the last couple of years with all of these grants. However, another key, if not even more important feature, is because this is a difficult job, right? It is taxing, it is physically, mentally taxing, and people are working long hours, unlike other ends of education where their hours aren't the same. Our hours are very long for our staff. I also think that, and on top of that, you don't have necessarily plan time, meeting time, proper breaks, right? Like, these are the things that actually, the ability to take time off properly, right, for your family and your needs. And these are the things that I'm finding actually are probably even more important in some ways to our staff in order to retain them. So for us, I feel like a goal should be that not only are programs able to pay people what they should be paid, right, according to their experience and credentials and whatnot, but also, can programs hire additional staff to support those other pieces I just discussed? To me, that's a measure of, are we succeeding in this? So I just want to throw that out there. The also, it's an absolute thing, and I can say it with my program: if you've already been charging rates that are closer to market rate than not, you are not seeing the same benefit right now with that 35% increase. But it's kind of interesting because right now there's pre-K involved. So we're a pre-K partner, right? And you've got pre-K funding coming in for all these pre-K students. And we have a large number, right? We have we have 3 preschool programs that receive pre-K funding. And so then you've got this increase in subsidies. So kids are like way overpaid, if you will, so to speak, at this point. So there's one amount you're receiving now, but when that pre-K funding goes away, that's a totally different ballgame, right? For those months that you don't have pre-K funding. So I've been talking to a couple other programs in the area who are kind of like I am, going, okay, how do I manage this? And like the budget piece of this, it's very convoluted, you know, and on top of that, we're going, okay, because I do have a large amount of children on subsidy. We've got about 56 families on subsidy. And for me, the impact of not so much the rate hikes as we go along, but for parents, but the increase in eligibility rate is going to be a major piece. And I do hear a lot of stress from people about, I need to create my budget for next year and I have zero clue. And I know everybody's moving as quickly as they can, and you can only do what you can do. We don't even know what the FPL is going to be. So, and so I tell people that all the time, like they get that. Nobody doesn't get that. But, so I think just moving forward, like that piece is going to be super important for programs, because I do anticipate, I'm hoping, obviously, that what will happen is what we anticipate will happen, right? Like many more people will be eligible. And so I hope these programs that have such a low number of child on CCFAP will have a significant bump in those kids. And so this will make a big difference for them. As well as I hope there are many more families that can take advantage of this, because personally, our program is full of families that are riding that edge, right? They're just off the mark right now, you know? So I'm looking forward to that for them, but this is all very convoluted right now, to be honest. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I get budgets, I get all that. And I have to say, it's like, there's so much shift right now that I'm just trying to help, just coming to a comfortable place with our own uncertainty for the next 6 months, so to speak, and trying to help some other programs who are kind of in that same boat. Like, okay, how do we do that? It's just kind of a shift in thought process. It's very different. So anyway, those are my couple of points.
Thanks, Sonia. Erin, yeah, did you want to respond before we move and introduce Susan Titterton?
I thank you all for your thoughtful comments and responses to the questions that we posed, and for the work that you're doing. I did want to mention that as I talked about, and several other people have talked about, like this estimating eligibility is a challenge. So I'll just put one last thing in, that we've been working on a survey template. If you're interested in surveying your families to better understand who actually might be eligible, who might be eligible in the future, we're happy to share the survey template with you, and you can use it as you see fit. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Erin, and thanks everyone for that input. I wanted to make a note of the chat, if you haven't taken a look or you can't see it, that Morgan had responded to Meg's comment around data, and agreeing that those are data points that they're looking to track in partnership with the Child Development Division and working with Child Trends to determine how to best do that. So that's great news. I had put that down as one of our action steps as a request or to look at with BBF. So awesome to know that. Great. And now I know she's here. I want to turn it. There she is. Hi, Susan. I want to turn it over now to Susan Titterton. She is the project coordinator for Vermont AYC's Advancing as a Profession strategy project, whatever you want to call it. She's going to give us a level set. I know some of us have varying degrees of understanding this project from when it started in 2017-18 to where it is now, but it really is getting to a point of action, and would love to update you on that, get your questions, concerns, ideas, and feedback. So I'll turn it over to Susan.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. I'm delighted to be here. I've had a chance to present to the ELD a couple times over the years, and it's nice to see some familiar faces. So what I'm going to do is a pretty crisp, I think, presentation for about 25 or 30 minutes and take you through a whirlwind of what we've done the last 3 years, but then focusing in the end on here are some things going on right now. And then if we can, I like to do a quick go around so I can hear something that excites you that you heard, and also something that raised a question or concern. We'll see what our time is like, but that's sort of ideal because then you can all hear from each other. But let me just dive in. I'm going to share my screen and go right into the slides and go to okay, so I know this will be familiar to some of you and maybe brand new to some of you. Let's see. This came originally from a NACI initiative called Power to the Profession, and the roadmap for this is the unifying framework. So we've been working with that as a roadmap for about 3 years. It's a national roadmap to a profession, an early childhood education profession. And over the course of the 3 years, this kind of marks the phases that we've gone through. Way back in the beginning in phase 1, we were just trying to see what was the will of the workforce. Did they even want to explore this notion of becoming a profession? You can see what the response was there and the percentages below that. In phase 2, which I'm going to go into in a little bit of detail in just a minute, we were really looking at what was the would the workforce choose to align with all these pieces of the unifying framework? That was the point at which we created a task force of early childhood educators, and Lori Metcalf, who's here today, is one of our newer members of that task force. It's been a real important group in this work, and we had to kind of break down the unifying framework into little pieces, take it out to the task force to say, I mean, from the task force to the workforce to say, here's what we're thinking about this professional identity piece, for example. What do you all think? And then create some consensus documents. So we had this cycle for each one of these pieces. And then looking at this chart is kind of it's old. You can see it's over a year old, year and a half old, but when we took a snapshot of what we'd done for workforce engagement in this second phase, this just gives you a sense of the numbers. It was really important that this be workforce led. So we worked very hard to keep bringing it out to the workforce and keep gathering feedback. The first piece we looked at was professional identity. I won't read all these numbers to you, but the way these slides are set up, you can see across the top the time frame within which the task force and then our outreach was operating, the number of participants in the workforce, the number of surveys we got back, and then down the right-hand side, you can see the percentages of agreement. So we were getting really high levels of consensus. This was interesting because the first reaction among the workforce way back when in 2019 was, wait, what? What do you mean we're not a profession? And so we had to look at what is it that professions have in common. So you can see the pieces of agreement that came out of this first part of the unifying framework. Then we took out the idea of 3 designations, 1 profession, 3 designations, ECE 1, 2, and 3, each with an aligned preparation pathway that would feed into each other. The scopes of practice were defined for each of these, as well as the idea that compensation and responsibility would increase as expertise increased. And you can see again the response we got. The third piece we took out was professional compensation. And Sonia, I was really hearing what you were just saying about the importance of, I forgot to fix the numbering on here, by the way, sorry about that. The importance of the second number 1, the benefits package. We heard that loud and clear in our outreach with the workforce that for many folks, that was of even greater importance to them than the dollars and cents. It was sort of like, how do you strike that work-life balance? How do you take care of yourself? So this was also a really important piece. The most recent piece we took out, and I put this graph up from the unifying framework just so you could see the structure of what was being proposed. So these are steps to early childhood educator professional licensure. It's an individual license as an early childhood educator. And there are 3 steps here. There's the completing an approved preparation program, passing a national assessment, which, by the way, does not exist yet. It's something that the National Commission is working on, and it will eventually be transitioned in, and then gaining a license to practice from a state board. So this was the model in the unifying framework. When we took this piece out to the workforce, you can see again the the results that we and the feedback that we got. We were asking people these broad questions about, given what you now understand, is this something that you would be interested in? Do you believe it will lead to better compensation and greater respect? Do you feel included in the commitment? This was a really important piece because of 2 things. One, in a mixed delivery system, we wanted to make sure that across settings, people were feeling included, and we did some subgroup breakdowns so that we were looking at center-based responses and also family childcare settings, those responses. And also we wanted to really be thinking about the current workforce and people not feeling sort of left out or pushed out of this initiative. And then again, you can see the bridge supports at the bottom. Oh, this is so interesting. So I've been dabbling with trying to clarify terminology. When we took out both the 3 designations piece and also this piece about licensure, there was a lot of confusion about looking at, so what is the license that people are holding from the Vermont Agency of Education? How does that relate to what we're talking about here? And so this is draft thinking, and we've been trying to share, some of this thinking with the workforce, with other stakeholders to say, does this help? But if you look at this big circle on the left, this is sort of the national perspective. That this is intended to be a national profession. With early childhood education professional licensure governed by that national commission. The license would be issued by a state level professional board, and the license qualifies a person to work with young children birth through age 8 in any early childhood education setting. And then again, the roles are specified based on their qualifications. And you can see that the title, that national title, is early childhood educator, with a designation of either ECE1, ECE2, or ECE3. I imagine you're familiar with what we have in place in our state through the Vermont Board of Education and licenses issued by the Agency of Education. So I won't go through that, but what I tried to do here was highlight in yellow the places where there's some connection, and then you can see in the white places on the left, there's no ECE1 or ECE2 through our Vermont Agency of Education. So just trying to puzzle this out. I think we're still in process trying to clarify terminology. So this will be ongoing work, but I thought you might be interested to see that piece today. And then, so where are we now? We've been, I wouldn't say since 2021, but certainly in the last couple years, starting to work with the ecosystem to figure out, how is this even going to work? What are the things that might shift? How might things look different? So we've begun to do some initial design work, and also this starts to lead into policy conversations. One of the things we know is that we've got to move compensation with the movement to individual professional licensure, that if you try to do one without the other, it just doesn't work. And so that's been a really guiding piece of not only the unifying framework, but how we've been thinking about this in Vermont. These are some of the design pieces we've started to work on. We're doing some intensive work on professional identity implementation right now, getting that information out, giving people a toolkit and ways to start to shift their language and really put that in place. The second area, we need aligned preparation pathways for all 3 designations. We'd done some initial work on ECE1 and also looking at the career ladder, shifting that so that it reflects these 3 designations. We had a study group, a higher ed study group that had been doing some really great work. So some of that's been started, paused. Number 3, you know that there was some work done on a minimum compensation scale, so that draft has been completed. And we're heavily into work on the professional licensure piece right now, trying to figure out what's the bridge for the current workforce going to look like, and a couple other pieces. So I'm going to go into those in just a bit of detail right now, because that's sort of where we are right now. The unifying framework says that the bridge must honor and include the existing field of experienced educators, and find a way for them to move into licensure and not be pushed out. And so looking at the model legislation, which the commission shared with us, and I should say Vermont's been, I think at this point, the only state they've been comfortable sharing that with, because we've laid so much of the foundation for this already. There will be policies that will waive some requirements for current educators. There'll be flexible approaches to demonstrate competence, and anything that's going to happen around licensure would be phased in over time so that people aren't in sort of a panic trying to figure out what to do about it. There'll be time, and we already have some folks who are saying, what could I be doing now to start to, position myself well? So we know there needs to be a bridge. We also, in policy in Vermont, we have, and I'm going to give you just a little background on this because this may be new information for you. The Secretary of State in Vermont has a division called the Office of Professional Regulation. Their mission is to protect the public, to make sure that no harm is being done by different professions or fields. And basically they create the regulations around professions and currently oversee at least 50 professions, everything from forestry to nursing to, I can't remember them all. You can look them up, right? So they have over 80,000 licensees. So we got in conversation with them and learned about, just sort of how this works. The nursing profession is one good example of a profession that has a state board through this Office of Professional Regulation. Like early childhood education, they have different levels of licenses. And you can just get a sense from looking at this of all the different pieces that go into this profession and the board that exists for it. The process that we're going to be engaged in, and we've started, is to create what's called a sunrise review application. So we're starting to put that information together to submit to the OPR. We're planning on submitting that in March. And then what they will do is review that, and they will take lots of information. They'll do some national research, they'll do some state level research, they'll take input from all different kinds of stakeholders within our state. And so some of you can expect to be part of that. They may reach out to you, or you may want to be we may connect you with them so you can say what you think about this idea. And basically, again, these are the steps that you request the profession be regulated. OPR does a comprehensive assessment, including looking at budgetary questions, and then they recommend to the legislature, or they may not. They may say, we don't recommend that early childhood education become a regulated profession. We think they will, but that remains to be seen. They need to do their due diligence. And then the legislature would take that information and decide whether and how to act on it. So it's an important process for us to go through, just to explore whether this can happen for early childhood education. So there's our timeline. We think that if this, they would be done with their assessment by late in 2024, and they would be making their recommendations in about a year from this time right now. So concurrent with that, we're looking at model legislation that has come from the Commission for Professional Excellence in Early Childhood Education. And it's a very exciting piece of document because it aligns completely with the unifying framework and sort of puts the pieces in place for this profession to be established, and is something that can be used in each state around the country, with the idea that you want to balance consistency so that it is a national profession with also a bit of flexibility because states are in a little bit different place. And so that's the way this model legislation, which we've been starting to study, is constructed. These are the pieces that are in the model legislation. You can sort of see the table of contents. So what we're doing this year is starting to set the stage for 2025. It's created, so it's built on the unifying framework. It establishes a nationally recognized profession. It describes what an ECE professional board might look like with a significant proportion of early childhood educators. It includes a transition period with some types of transitional licensure. It includes professional compensation, the idea that it be established concurrently. And so again, we're doing some work to study this at this point in time. So along with this is actually my last slide. I think I was pretty crisp. Along with this, we have been continuing to do outreach with the workforce and have an ongoing campaign for early childhood educators to indicate if they support this movement towards becoming a recognized profession. I think we have close to 700 signatures at this point in time, and this is an ongoing pledge because the legislature and anyone is going to want to know, does the workforce even support this? And so it's been really important for this to be not only workforce led, workforce informed, but to amplify the voices of the workforce in this particular work that we've been engaged in. So I'm going to get out of these slides now. And whoops, I forgot to stop sharing, didn't I? Am I still sharing? Oh, good.
You're good.
Okay. So before we hear from you all, and again, the thing that I think I'd be most interested in hearing is what did you just hear that excited you? And also, is there something that raised a question or concern? Because it'd be really helpful to hear those things from this group. But I wanted to invite Lori Metcalf, if you'd like to, Lori, to just say a little bit about what it's been like joining the task force and this work from your perspective. Do you want to speak to that for a few minutes?
Sure, I can do that. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I mean, this work excites me very much because I was involved pre-phase one in some work. I remember in a basement of an organization in Middle Vermont where we were looking at, what this would even look like at the very, very beginning. And so to be on the task force now is really exciting to see the progression. The other thing about the task force that's really exciting is the group that we have is incredibly thoughtful and committed and talks through a lot of different perspectives and questions and scenarios, and I love the cross representation of the different people who are on the task force, and also just like their commitment. I don't think Susan mentioned this, but if she did, I apologize for the repeat. But the fact that people from the task force and leading this, like Susan and Rachel, are invited to national conferences, right? As Vermont is a true leader in this work, and I just think it's really commendable and exciting to be a part of something that really will have a very long-term impact on our field, right? When we talk about that burnout prevention and retention of early childhood educators and bringing them forward, and knowing that they support this and they want to be professionally recognized and want to come together and be, seen as a profession and recognized as a profession, I think is really exciting. And just being a part of the task force and in those conversations really helps you to grow and sort of challenge yourself to look at things in a variety of different ways and be incredibly considerate of how this work will impact our entire field and not just a subset, right? So yeah, that's sort of been my experience or what I'm enjoying about this work, and also happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Lori. So Sherry, how do you feel about calling on people? And then I can take notes. Could you do that for me?
I could. Does anyone want to raise their hand to be first or second or third that has already been thinking of something they wanted to share?
And again, it's something, love to hear something that excites you about it. And also if there's a question or concern that's raised, and I'm going to take notes. And then at the end, I'd like to respond to some of the questions that seem like most pertinent, but I want to hear it all.
I can. Excites me. Yay. I think it's great to be recognized and to be to get that feather in your hat, to finally be I am enough instead of I'm not enough under so many different things. I think what concerns me, or what's concerning to the field, is nobody wants to be a one in anything. And when they're put there, I hope that it's done in a way that isn't that doesn't feel like you're not enough, or that other people are more, or that you're stuck where you are. I hope that the pathways come out and they're attainable and available and supported, and that can help. Look, if I want to get to the next step, I have to do XYZ. Very clear and concise. I would love to see, because one of the things that I hear all the time is I would get my license. This is BA teachers. I'd get my license if it weren't for the praxis. So if maybe once it's a profession, higher ed would look at it and say, maybe we could do cohorts or classes that would take the place, or cohorts that would help prepare for praxis. So it's a big cost to fail. It's a lot of pressure. It's a test that nobody likes. So if there was a way of doing that, I think you would flip a lot of the field into those roles much easier if that fear were subsided, if they had an active role in being able to meet something that they don't know anything about.
Great, thanks, Christina. And I'm circling that praxis question. I want to come back to that.
I'm going to go to Meg and then Becca. Meg Baker.
I didn't have my hand up, so I was confused.
I know no one had their hand up.
It is okay to pass.
You can also pass. You can also pass.
I'm
Fine,
thinking about what Sonia said at the beginning around planning time and other compensation pieces and disparities that I see between what public school preschool teachers have, especially with regards to planning time, and what I usually see in community programs. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest differences that I see, is that there's not enough planning time in most community programs. I'm also thinking in our current pre-K landscape, I think both Becca and I have experienced this sort of disconnect between administrative responsibilities within a school system and early childhood, and there is not really an administrative degree that makes sense for an early childhood educator. So I actually don't remember. Becca, did you get the principal licensure? That's what I ended up with. But having conversations, and I think these are ongoing with the Agency of Education about what is that leadership piece. And I think that will become more and more important as we spend more time talking about pre-K within the public school systems.
Thanks, Meg.
Sherry's calling on us just because she knows we've been listening and picking it all apart in our heads.
Because they're sending me messages, so I know that. So and before Becca goes, I just I'm hoping, and you can pass, but I'm hoping to hear from Claire and Linda January next.
Yes, most definitely. So I think for me, there's the piece about where does this fall in the larger system and conversations? Because to me, we already, and this has been my struggle the whole time with this initiative. There's already a system that exists in AOE world. There's already a system that exists in Northern Lights criteria. And so for me, it's the conversation of what's the intertwining and where can we smooth it conversation and marketing to people? And do we need any of the three of those to stand as individual pieces? I think that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. I think really strongly that piece about not as much, hey, I'm a school person who's required to be an administrator. My life's been in early ed. I don't really fit the principal. Let's go for that. But I think in our community program worlds, there's that same piece. A lot of the conversations that are coming up are what's the director credential overlap versus as an early childhood educator with the competencies, which for folks that don't know, the early childhood special ed and the early childhood competencies are both in various revision pieces. So those are also rapid firing changing. And then for people who didn't see the chat, there's an option not to take the praxis if you meet XYZ other steps. So I'll send that to Sherry to send on. And the other piece around that is that the AOE is recognizing that passing the praxis can sometimes be difficult, even once people have entered the process. So there's a new process where you can actually extend your provisional. And one of the reasons that your extension will get approved is that you haven't yet passed the praxis. So just a little bit of like AOE sub-knowledge that I had. Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Becca. So I'm wondering about Claire and then Linda.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of similar when Becca just spoke, kind of looking at what are the intersections and how is this connected, obviously, to what exists and is being stood up by Northern Lights. I'm not sure I understand all of the details or specifics. I'm not part of the work group, but I do think it's, from my vantage point, I think we're still, I think we all agree that we're still in the stage where we're trying to regrow a workforce. We're trying to get young people to enter a workforce that I feel like it's not in vogue anymore. It's considered, I think, in the last 5 years as exhausting with long hours and low pay. And so really looking at the feeder system, like we recently at the Family Center have had 3 folks that are young and that have literally zero experience in the education field approach us. And so, but it's kind of like dropping them into a statewide system would be great. So it's not like our responsibility to kind of onboard and groom's the wrong word, but to nurture this interest. So I think I've said this a million times to people that have heard me, but that's my stump. Like like catching young people that are like, you know, the voc tech age through like up to 30, that, because I feel like a whole crew of people left the field that were like in that group and older, that are saying no thank you. And then making it accessible, what you're talking about, Susan, having it have crosswalks that can reach people at variety of levels. And I think the last thing is when someone, I think it was Becca, was talking about the director, and also Meg, the parity between public and non-public ed, what the degrees are. The director credential, there's again a total dearth of qualified directors that meet CDD requirements, have the director credential, and anytime like anyone that I know has a turnover in their directorship, it is like absolutely so terrifying there. And so growing the non-public school system admin leadership function is a huge gap from my perspective. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Claire. That was great. So we're going to go to Linda, and then I'm hoping to hear from Cynthia and then Sonia.
Work has always excited me, and I've always kind of stayed on the outskirts of it, not fully immersed in it. But you know, I think that point of like we currently have systems, so and like for me, I have built a lot of things around those current systems. So how am I like my salary scale and things like that? So like how am I gonna, you know, that idea of how does the current system truly fit into a new system, and how easy is it gonna be able to move things over? And you know, are people who are qualified to lead a classroom now still going to be able to lead a classroom in the new system, and things like that? Those are things that I am concerned about. And just the ease of getting people into the system. You know, it's sometimes pulling teeth to get them to do the career ladder levels, right? And so how easy is it to get into that system? I also worry about a system that's too heavily focused on higher ed through college coursework. Just finding that a lot of the new people that have come into the workforce, that maybe college isn't taking college courses and doing that route isn't the best route. So, and finding that beyond fundamentals, there's not a ton of supports for people to do like a CDA if that's what they want to do. If they want to do something beyond fundamentals, get a pay increase and move up that career ladder, there's not a lot of supports for them unless they choose to take college courses, and that's not always the right path for people. So I've struggled with that the last couple of years to kind of figure out how to support that population, and just want to make sure that there's still room for people who are amazing caregivers, and don't want to go to school, whether because it's not the right path for them in their 20s, or because their professional development plan is to retire in 3 years. But they add a lot of amazing value to the work that we're doing. So
well, this is Cynthia. Professionalizing the field excites me. I think I have a lot of similar thinking to Linda, and it definitely crosses over with some of the comments that Becca spoke of earlier. So I'm excited about this work. I've had various roles in and outside of it, mostly outside lately. I think some of the concerns I have, or some of my thinking, especially after listening to Susan today, would be really interested in the bridge part of this work, really building those supports, really aligning across these systems. And then I'm really curious, I don't know that it's a concern yet, but I'm really curious, how are we thinking about dismantling some of our systems so that it's not repetitive, so that we aren't layering system upon system upon system, but that the bridge really creates that alignment and that access into, is it agency of education if people are going in that college coursework and licensure route, or is it the onboarding that Claire talked about? And so how do we sort of build this new profession and the supports to get where people either are and want to either move to, or phase out, if you will, or phase in, but not have it be just one more system, one more professional board, one more professional system. So I'm thinking about, it's already really taxing, I think, for the early childhood field. We have, and all of it's meant in good faith, right? We have Sparks and New Stars, we have childcare licensing, we have agency of education licensing, we have all of these different regulatory bodies. And I worry about the continued layered effect of monitoring and licensing and requirements and standards that we lay upon the field and upon the programs. And are we thinking about what we want to dismantle and how we want to dismantle that as we're building a profession? I would also just put one last plug. Linda said it sort of at the end, and Susan has heard me say this before. I do wonder about, for folks, I'll just speak about myself. I did leave the teaching field. I couldn't afford to stay in it. I would love to go back. I had a license, I let it expire, and I'm not convinced yet that I want to reenact it because I'm not sure that the processes will lead to something that will be super fulfilling given where everything is. But I do wonder if there are those of us who are closer to retirement who might want to get back into the field, and what are those on-ramps?
Thank you.
Interesting question. That last one, Cynthia. Hadn't really thought a lot about that, but that is very interesting. Honestly, everything really excites me about this, and my staff is actually super excited because I've been dragging them along this journey with me for the last 5 years. I just think the difference I already see in the language we use here at our program, and that we use amongst each other, already I can see people feeling like, okay, right, I can be respected. This is a worthwhile profession for me to be in. The changes we've made with compensation already, even though we're not where we need to be, already make people feel good, right, and the benefits. So I'm really excited about those steps and things. I hold some of the same concerns other people hold. The whole integration with the system as a whole, that's a big, right? That's a huge undertaking. And I agree with a, layering of just to-dos for everybody, like what to integrate with and how to do it. So I know that's on everybody's minds, and it's on my mind too, for sure. I also think about the director leadership piece. Because this is, just making sure that the supports are there. And they're also wondering, like, so where's my exact place in all this, right? Like how do I fit in? Is there like a little something I do extra and then I am officially part of this? Or like, how do we talk about that, and where do people see themselves in that, at that level? I have little concerns about, are we going to get the compensation and benefits and supports all in place in time for how this plays out, and when we're sort of launching all of this, will that all be ready, and will people, until that's coming, like how do we continue to help people learn how to structure their business to particularly community-based businesses to be working toward that, because I do speak with a lot of other directors about that kind of thing, like what you can be doing right now to kind of get yourself further along the spectrum. you know, I do see and hear the college course piece. You know, I'm a proponent of really trying to support staff through college courses if I can, but I do have one or two folks who I have one woman who's again at retirement age technically, and she is really racist. And I'm probably not going to change that, to be honest with you. And then I have another really new person. And so what I find in order to get those folks to that point is that you literally end up doing sort of a lot of the tutoring and help yourself of moving them along. So I do think about what supports those very new people who maybe weren't super successful in school, in high school. They come out thinking, I just cannot do college, like I can't do it. And even if they get successfully through fundamentals, it feels different when they know it's for credit and there's like a bunch of homework and they're really concerned. So but I do have one of those people that I really, really don't want her to leave this field, right? Like she's really good, very instinctual and very natural. So I think about that too. Yeah, I think that's kind of.
Thanks, Sonia. So I'm going to share a few things, and I'm thinking I'm not going to call on anyone unless you raise your hand, because I want time for Susan to be able to respond to some of what she's heard, and we can further have discussion. So I'm sharing so that those of you that do want to share have time to raise your hand. So I think my concerns are just around, you know, what Cynthia talked about around like, how do we dismantle a line, that sort of thing. We don't want to create a system on top of other systems. But mostly I'm excited about it. And I'm excited about it when I think about what it can do for clarity around career pathways and what role you want to have in early childhood. You know, Susan did a quick presentation, and a deeper dive really does, I think, illuminate some of that, rather than it feeling more cumbersome or you know, a little more crazy of something else. It actually provides a lot of clarity. It allows higher ed and other preparation programs to have more clarity. And it also provides transparency for families in terms of like, what is the level of preparation and training that those working with their children have, because it's a lot more clarity. I think the other thing to remember is the individual responsibility. So the way the childcare system works right now is, I'm just going to pick on Sonia, if Sonia has an employee who is not performing at a particular standard and with training and knowledge of competencies that ends up in her program being out of compliance or having violations, her program bears all that responsibility, and there's no individual responsibility. And that caregiver can leave and just go do, you know, similar things at another program, and just so that interests me, that in terms of the level of quality that we want for young children, that the process, the clear pathways, the preparation, and the individual responsibility to perform at a level and standard that we expect with young children would be implemented in a system like this. So I'm going to call on Lynn, and then we'll have Susan spend some time.
Thanks, Sherry. Hi, everyone. This has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate that everybody's openness and sharing about this topic, because it's so important. I really am excited about trying to build this profession and really recognize the folks that are working in it at the levels that they're at. I do note all of the concerns that have been shared, such as, you know, not having a college track option. I sort of feel like that's the direction that most many professional development systems are going. And so it's just something that we're going to really need to consider a lot more. So I won't take up a lot of time, but I think the two concerns I have is the confusion about that word licensure. That's professional licensure, and then there's educator licensure, and they're not the same. And so I feel like there may have even been confusion here at this meeting today about that term licensure. And so it's a caution that I have about, you know, really being clear about what we're talking about when we use that word. And then there's program licensure, and that, you know, all that is, it just makes it very confusing. The other thing is I wanted to ask a question. The unifying framework is supposed to go from birth to age 8. So it seems like the system is being built around the birth to age 6 maybe system. I haven't really heard anything about after school being included in this. So I just wondered if when Susan, when you know, make your concluding statements, if you'll address something about where after school fits into this picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Is it over to me, Sherry?
It's over to you, throwing it over to you, Susan,
Oh
to,
gosh, well,
you have about
8 minutes.
18 minutes. You
How
can
many
take up to
minutes?
15. You can take up to 10. We end at noon.
Okay,
And
well,
our agency, unless Lynn had, Don Rouse from CDD is not here, and Amy Murphy from, they usually do some agency updates. They're not here. So I think we could take a little more time if needed.
all right, so I have like 2 pages of notes. Let me hit the excites first and then go through some of the themes around concerns. And so the things I heard were excited about, you know, that sense of recognition, the idea that there might be planning time and benefits built in, the idea of a program not having to do all of the nurturing, but there being a statewide system that would be in place to help bring people along in their careers. And let's see. There were a few people who said I'm excited about the work in general and didn't go into specifics. Sonia, you talked about the differences you're starting to see already with language, people feeling more respected, some of those changes in compensation starting to come into play. Sherry, you talked about the clarity around the career pathways and how that could look, and transparency for families. And Lynn, you also talked about that notion of the recognition. I think that the questions and concerns you raised, a lot of them are the ones we're sitting with too. When you do this kind of generative change, there isn't like a easy sort of, oh, that's the answer, because you're figuring stuff out as you go along. I think just to talk about the praxis, and I think who named it, that Lynn, at the end, you said, yeah, this whole licensure thing, this is still confusing. I think we have to just keep working at it and trying to clarify it. The dilemma is, if we drop the language around, you know, that's licensure, that's around early childhood educator, but that's being used as a national profession, like we've got to figure out how that works, right? Because it's a national profession. We can't just say, oh, we'll use other words. But I think that there's confusion around, you know, what's the AOE license? What's this professional license we're talking about? We've got to keep working on that. The commission is working on a national assessment for ECE1, ECE2, and ECE3. It's going to take them a few years to do that. They're looking first at what are all the kinds of assessment that are in place in states already. But going back to Christina's earlier point in the conversation about praxis, right now we have no indication that the praxis is going to be the national assessment for ECE3. So just sort of set that aside for right now. We don't know what it's going to look like. We do know there's a commitment that it be accessible, affordable, equitable, you know, so there are some principles the commission's working with as they look at what states already have in place, and they're kind of sifting through which of these assessments do match the principles that they're aiming at and which don't. So there's that. Totally agree with what everybody said about, they call it unwinding the system versus dismantling it, right? Dismantling is kind of a scary word, and there are things in the system that need to continue to exist, and then other things that need to be kind of unwound and reconfigured. I don't have any idea what that looks like yet. I think that's part of the thinking together we have to do, and why this work needs to be done well and not quickly. To really take the time to think through how things are going to work. So I would just make that point. Some of you talked about the pipeline. And so that's definitely something that we're thinking about, is what attracts people to this profession and how can they move through it in a way that makes sense to them. Let's see, I told you I had so many pages of notes. Oh, the bridge, I want to talk about that. A couple of you mentioned really wonderful educators who might be a few years from retirement. And in the model legislation, first of all, our timeline, we think, is nothing, this isn't going to be stood up for a few years. So if you're 3 years from retirement, you may retire before this all happens. Even when it does happen, in the model legislation, there's a type of license for experienced current educators who may be near retirement that's called a transition license that would be available for a certain amount of time. So there is flexibility built into this model legislation that we're looking at that I think will help to assuage some of those concerns for some members of the experienced workforce, and also ways for people who have a lot of experience but maybe don't have a degree to show that they have the competencies so that they would also qualify. So that bridge is just so critically important, because we really want to make sure that everyone who wants to stay in the profession has a way to do that, that's supported and equitable. Let's see, the director, that director credential conversation I was really interested in. I know that when Power to the Profession was developing the unifying framework, they said, yes, absolutely. The people who are training early childhood educators and the people who have pedagogical supervision over them, they need to be considered too. But it was sort of like they said, yes, and we can't take all that on just yet. So they were just focusing on the workforce. But I think you raise an important point that we've got to, in Vermont and everywhere, we've got to be looking at how does that part mesh in. And then I guess the last thing I'll say, and then I'll just stop because you may have, two more things. Lynn, after school, really interesting question. So we raised that question early on, and I don't know if this is a complete answer, but I found it helpful at the time. If you look at the role and responsibilities, you could find it on the website, or it's in the unifying framework. One of the ways we were asked to think about that is that after school programs typically aren't expected to fulfill all of those responsibilities because they're working in a certain part of the day. And so that helped me to sort of think about, yep, related. We need to think about it, but it's not exactly the same as early childhood education and all the things that are part of that. So I don't know if that helps. That's the best answer I have at the moment. And I think that's something we could think about. And then the last thing I wanted to say is we're talking about folks who have not been super successful in school, and just that, prior bad experiences or even traumatic life experiences that interfered with their education. We've been working a lot with, Rachel Hunter and I have been working a lot with Melissa DeBlois at CCV, who is the director of the prior learning assessment programs, and really learning about the population that finds those programs a good entry point into showing what they already know, into supported entry into college coursework. So I don't think that's a complete answer, but I think it's been a really fascinating part of our system. And we're lucky in Vermont that we seem to have a more robust prior learning assessment system than any other state I've heard from. We also have a statewide community college system, with which other states don't. They sort of got one here, one there, one there. So we have some things in existence in our current system that are really well poised to help with this transition. And I find that encouraging. So I don't know, what did I leave out?
Susan, I just want to reiterate, and you, just again, you know, that the whole piece around when it would be implemented, the considerations for the bridge. And also, you know, often we frame this when we're talking about it, is it really is looking at a future workforce. And you know, it really is more about how and how we can bring more people into the field. And one of the, you know, part of the rationale for that is if you have very clear pathways that are supported and roles, it's an easier field to choose. If it really, you know, if it is a profession, it's recognized and it's very clear how you get to be one, which isn't really what we have right now as part of the system.
And I have to say, in some of the early PD, you know, the outreach we did, the sessions, I heard people thinking about the impact on having, on recruiting ability with having a profession. And especially when you start to layer on, you know, the feeling of respect, you know, compensation that's fair and professional, and people in higher ed who would say, you know what, I have these students and I always counsel them to go get their elementary license, you know, and pursue that, because I think as an early childhood educator or working with the youngest children, they can't pay their college loans back. So I think if we start to create something that looks like a way that you could imagine having a career and living, that of itself is going to be of some help with the pipeline. Lynn, I'd be happy to share my slides. Is the best way for me to do that Sherry has them.
Yep, so I can share. Jen Severance has been taking notes, and Susan, I have them, I downloaded them, and Jen already has them, I think, so we'll send them out.
And I just want to say, we are figuring this out. So this is not like walking in with everything all tied up in a bow and saying, yep, we know how all this is going to work. That's going to go away. That's going to go away. This is going to happen. This is what we need to do this together. So I just want to infuse that spirit into this conversation and anything that happens afterwards. The last thing I was going to say is, I or someone I will arrange would be happy to follow up with this group if you want to have more conversation, or if there's a group that you're a part of separate from here that you'd like to have someone come and talk more about this, we'd be happy to do that. Just give me a holler or ask Sherry and we'll arrange it.
Susan, could I ask a question?
Of course.
Once this is designed and set, I'm the optimistic once it is, will it be clear enough so center directors upon hiring will be able to look at something they've requested from the staff member, the new potential staff member, so that they will know where to pull them in, where Northern Lights will probably put them as far as ECE 1, 2, or 3, so that they don't pay something and they go, oh, they didn't take those 5 credits, so now you're this, and lower the pay.
My understanding, Chris, is that the person would come with, if they completed their preparation program, right? Because there still can be people who are working in centers as part of their preparation program. It doesn't say you have to have a license before you can even do that. But if they've completed it, then they would come with a license. They would be a licensed early childhood educator, and there would be a pay scale. You know, we've got that wage scale with possible, you know, the benefits built in. That would all be clear. Does that answer your question?
And also what would be clear is what kind of preparation they're coming with, because that is essential to creating the profession, is that you know the standards and competencies and at which role they're qualified and prepared to work.
Yes, and both of you together made that the answer I was looking for. Yes.
Right.
Coming in, will the director easily be able to see and explain to them where you are, where you need to go, and this is what you're getting. So there's not the backtracking after.
Yes.
Thank you.
Exactly.
And
That's
one of
the
the things
dream.
we're trying to do to build on the current system, and I think we have agreement about this, is equivalence in the career ladder. So if someone has, let's say they have a career ladder 3A, 3B, right? So they've got an associate degree and it's in ECE, or it's in a related field, or it's in an unrelated field, and they have, I forget how many, 21 credits in early childhood education, that those could all qualify for, initially qualify for an ECE 2 professional license. So we're not going to say, oh, you didn't get your associate's degree in early childhood education. You have to go back and get another one. We're going to build in equivalence. That's part of the bridge for people who are already in the workforce. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Susan. So I think, we will invite Vermont AYC and or Susan back as the process unfolds. They will be submitting the application in March to OPR, and some of you may be interviewed, and we will provide updates. And in the meantime, in the last few minutes, Sharon Harrington has a couple of updates. I want to remind everyone our next meeting is February 8th, and Victoria Ward is going to be part of that meeting. She is going to, with the small sample size we have so far, talk about Sparks and sort of what the experiences are so far around Sparks, and we will have a full agenda coming out. But I'm going to turn it over to Sharon for a few updates before we close out.
Thanks, Sherry. And thanks, Susan, for sharing this overview. I think that much of the work that we're doing at Vermont AYC, this is in the back of our mind as we think about existing programs and how they intersect with the field and the system. And so it's just, I really appreciated Sonia's comment here in the chat about this, like, this is a marathon, and that's part of the intentionality of it, which feels really good. So as Sherry said, next meeting, we'll have a more in-depth conversation about Sparks, but I have a few updates about Sparks and about some of the other programs at Vermont AYC. As many of you may know, yesterday there was an overview webinar about the program, and there were 130 participants, mostly direct care providers. It was recorded, and we're hoping to have that posted on our website today if we don't have any technical issues, but that's the intention. As of yesterday, there were 195 assessment requests. Those are class assessments, and the assessors that we have on staff now are booked through May. We're in the final stages of hiring a third assessor, and Nikki Bearer, one of our lead assessor, is offering class trainings. Those are being offered in the evening and on the weekends to capture the widest audience, and they've been hugely popular. It's something that we heard really right away, that people felt like they needed to have more understanding of the class tool. And so the registrations are ranging anywhere from 30 to 150 for those scheduled trainings. The quality sports specialists, also known as coaches, the team have all completed their class inter-rater reliability tests and have been added to the instructor registry. And the intention is that, so during this period of time when there's such a high demand, some quality sports specialists are offering scored assessments outside of the regions they'll be coaching in. But ultimately, the goal was to have them be reliable so that when they're doing unscored assessments and coaching, it's really going to be directly connected to their scored assessments. Right now, they're doing sort of a soft launch. So we can test all of our systems, our documentation, all of the pieces that we've built into the program. So we've responded to 26 requests for unscored assessments and 15 direct coaching inquiries. And they have also been conducting meetings across the state with the Vermont Early Childhood Networks and other state committees, BBF councils, regional councils, just to introduce themselves to their communities that they'll be working in and provide an overview. The intention is that in the next e-news, we'll announce that this coaching component of Sparks is going live across the state. And who knows what that will bring, but they're preparing themselves. So we just learned from the Child Development Division and are excited to share that the STARS pilot period will be extended to a full year. So that is huge because we've been hearing a lot of anxiety about that. So it will go through June 2025. And so that's going to give us more opportunity to engage with programs and offer the Spark support without them feeling any sense of risk. So that's the quick summary of Sparks today. And for our other programs, the career advancement team wanted me to share that there are still a few slots left in the Castleton licensure portfolio course, which starts in February. Otherwise, all the other programs are closed for their spring enrollment models. And they have submitted updates with the latest apprenticeship standards in the fall, and they will share that with the field once they're approved by the Department of Labor, Vermont Department of Labor. The EC Engagement Department wanted to share also super exciting news that there will be a grace period for career ladder certificate bonuses, and that announcement will be coming out this month. This is an opportunity for early childhood educators who have never applied for a career level ladder certificate, or for those who applied since 2018. Jen, I can send you this. I see you frantic, and I apologize. I was going to tell you in the beginning. I'll email you this. I'm so sorry. So anyone who applied since 2018 and were deemed ineligible due to the 2-year credentialing requirement will have the opportunity to apply and receive their bonus. And the really exciting part about this is going to give us the additional data potentially about the current workforce that's really going to help us to direct investments and workforce needs. And so just really keep in mind that once this announcement comes out, it's limited, it's time limited, and it's funding limited. So when it's gone, it's gone. So happy to share that with you. The annual conference planning committee is going to be soliciting volunteers this month and next. And we're also in the process of creating a student loan repayment assistance application tutorial video, sort of addressing some of the places in the process that people have expressed a lot of questions. And we are hoping to have that out by the end of the month. And we're still looking for applicants for that program as well. So thank you.
That's amazing. Amazing updates. Thank you. And I wanted to note that Lynn is recruiting childcare licensing supervisor in the chat. Thank you, Lynn, for letting us know that. And thank you, everyone. I want to end on time, and Karen, you did a great job squeezing all that in so we can end on time. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone that shared. This is really super helpful. Jen, I have some action items that I'll put at the end of the notes that we can take a look at and consider for follow-up for future meetings. And I hope to see all of you in February. There's no invite on your calendar because we're shifting to have BBF own the invite. So that should be coming soon. So it's February 8th, 10 to noon. Invite should be coming out either this week or next. We're just working with those distribution lists and getting that to the person at BBF that's going to kind of hold that. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.